Welcome to the Bahrain International Circuit, and more accurately, the Bahrain International Karting Circuit, where we've come to record our latest video recapping all of the action from F1 pre-season testing. I'm joined by Autosport Grand Prix editor Alex Kalinauckas, and it's been another really busy day of running in Bahrain. The team's slowly starting to, I think, up the pace a little bit more, give us some more clues as to where things are lying this season. And I think, Alex, really the talking point of this test has been Mercedes, those side pods, and the pace we're seeing from them. I mean, where are things looking at the moment? Because Mercedes normally come out of the box looking all right and then take a big step forward in the second week. We've maybe not quite seen that yet, but could they be sandbagging?
So I think the key thing here is that they haven't gone for any serious performance runs on the softest tyres. Now, we'll come on to that a little bit later. They have been running them, Lewis Hamilton on the C5s later on, but yeah, especially with the question of sandbagging, there's a lot to unpick there. But what's really interesting, obviously, is that Mercedes tops the Barcelona test, but so far haven't been near the top of the times. Now, if we think about today in particular, middle day of running, first of all, incredibly hot and incredibly windy. So conditions not really representative. I personally think that Bahrain is quite the outlier track because of that abrasive track surface and obviously the heat and everything that comes up. But if we think about this morning when George Russell was in the car and what Mercedes did today, mainly essentially sort of off the pace, long running stuff. They tested the prototype C2 tyres, and at one stage he was also running a massive aero wake, checking what was going on at the back of the car. So yeah, Lewis Hamilton took over for the afternoon, jumped up the order. But yeah, the question of, is Mercedes sandbagging? It looks like it, and it doesn't look like it, which is interesting. But I think there's some pretty key details that we can pick into. Essentially, we look at the speed trap figures yesterday, which we got access to. Russell right at the foot of the times. So that car, in terms of going on the straights, is not at full whack, let's face it. And the suggestion is that they're pretty damn quick in the corners. It's Mercedes, you'd expect that to be. Interesting with the new side pod design, but yeah, down back in terms of the speed trap figures. But Lewis Hamilton, as I mentioned on those C5 tyres earlier, was going very quickly. He did set his personal best lap at that time on that rubber. If you watch the mini sectors in the media centre using the screen there, it was all purple, all green, all looking all nice and rosy. Might not necessarily have gone fastest, but at least would have got amongst it with Carlos Sainz Jr. in the Ferrari. But two yellow sectors, mini sectors that is, right at the end, he backed out of it. Probably quite a big lift as he came towards the line. So that would sort of suggest a little bit of sandbagging going on. Not unusual for testing, but also Hamilton was saying, look, the conditions, it was so windy, it's difficult to drive, he's oversteering all over the place. Mercedes does seem to have a little bit of maybe a bogey track thing for Bahrain. Not that they're necessarily horrendous here, but it's the way that the heat and the abrasive surface, as I said earlier, just combines for them. We saw it in testing last year, albeit with very different cars. So yeah, a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B for sandbagging.
Interesting. I think that we've seen all of the top three teams, Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, they're all talking each other up really at points. And even yesterday, George Russell said Ferrari, globally, that looks like the best car. I asked that to Carlos Sainz Jr. today, and he said, well, Mercedes, that's typical of them. Like, I wouldn't believe it. It's not the first year that they've said that kind of thing. But at this time, I mean, we've only got one day of pre-season testing left. Why sandbag? What do you gain from it in terms of sort of the battle against your rivals at the front of the pack?
Essentially, it's not giving your hand away. It's keeping things to yourself. It's what they always do, throughout free practice, particularly with engine modes in that case. But also they know that they're going to be running to a set amount of fuel because they know what calculations to make to find out what their actual pace is. But there is sort of a key factor into the sort of camp of why Mercedes might be more inclined to sandbag here is the sort of the furore, the discussion about those side pods. Now, Christian Horner, obviously there was the communications intricacy, the saga that went on there, whether he did say that those side pods are against the spirit of the regulations or not. That's whatever. In the press conference today, he said that it's an extreme interpretation of the rules, but it is legal. Now, that's obviously a different stance, but, fairly cordial there. And in fact, I saw Toto Wolff and Christian Horner and Michael Schmidt, the journalist who reported those initial quotes from Christian Horner, having a lovely, friendly, amicable chat in the paddock at the end of the day yesterday. It all seems to be well there. But what's interesting is the side crash impact structure and the wing mirrors and how that's mounted up there. That could be the real key problem. So Mercedes want to keep a little bit of pace back. Maybe if they're anticipating rivals might potentially be upset by that and might want to, band together and form a protest against it. That could be, that would be a suggestion of why you might want to hide a little bit of pace if you have it in hand.
Yeah, even so late in the day in this test. And we mentioned Ferrari and Red Bull there. How have they been looking? Because Ferrari keep being talked up, and everyone you talk to, even though they've not really brought a huge number of new parts between the two tests, seem to be really impressed by how Ferrari are performing.
Definitely. So new little developments on the front wing and on the floor as well. So, it's those incremental gains, they do add up. But when it comes to Ferrari, I would suspect they've shown a little bit more of their hand. That's what they've traditionally done when it comes to testing. It sounded like the engine was turned up more in Barcelona, a little bit different here. I think everybody else is generally running higher engine modes. But yeah, with Red Bull, they sort of never show their hand. They're doing most of their running on the harder rubber. They have set sometimes on the softer ones as well. But yeah, I would say Ferrari, I would guess, and obviously don't know this for sure, probably shown a little bit more of its hand than Red Bull has. But again, it's the same deal with Mercedes. They don't stand to gain anything, so they just hold everything back.
That makes sense. And even Max Verstappen, after the running today, he was asked, are you going to bring any new bits to the car tomorrow? And he said, well, maybe we will and maybe we won't. So it's all smoke and mirrors at this point, I must say. Very interested to see how things are going. In terms of the other news of the day, I think Williams was probably the big on-track stoppage. Nicholas Latifi stopped with a brake issue that then turned into a fire, which he told me melted the rear suspension, and that ended their day quite early. I mean, not as kind of setback you want at this point, and particularly for Latifi, who didn't run yesterday either.
No, absolutely. I mean, it cost Williams well over half a day of running because it happened just before the final hour of the first session at the track today. Yeah, I'd say the big story of the day, other than sort of what's really going on at the front, is just unreliability in general. Now, as you say, Williams was the sort of headline one because it was so spectacular. Definitely, the team said it was a minor problem that caused the brake issue, but it sort of happened as he was coming into turn one. The fire got worse and worse and worse, and then, as you say, you could see it. The suspension had completely gone as the fire was melting it. Really quite worrying, the sort of explosion of the brake discs and things like that. You hope the marshals, everybody's going to be okay in that situation as they're trying to put the fire out. So a little bit worrying there. But the big thing, as I said, for Williams is the lost time, the damage that would have done to the floor and all the parts and things like that. So yeah, very unfortunate for that team because it had been so smooth for Williams in Barcelona. Loads and loads and loads of running. Obviously, they've got very svelte and nice looking side pods as well. So they may be thinking, oh, if Mercedes have done this, we're onto a winner here as well. But anyway, we'll see how Williams responds tomorrow. There are problems for other teams as well. Alpine as well had a long stoppage. Esteban Ocon in the car stopped out on track. There's a suggestion, speaking to people in the paddock, that he ran out of fuel and it was sort of not a planned one, let's say. That the team itself is sort of going, he sort of felt a problem and felt it was important to stop, as is their want. And there's a similar story at Aston Martin. Sebastian Vettel stopped, he stopped off track, but it was technically still on a Formula One track that's been used twice, actually. It was the exit of turn 4 where they go left, or where they went left on the 2020 Sakir Grand Prix, and also 2010 Bahrain Grand Prix, and they used that.
Good knowledge.
yeah, that extended layout, because it was all a bit confusing where he was clearly on a racing track, but yet there was no red flag at the time because he was so far out of the way. The team says that he felt a big vibration and just opted to stop out of a precaution. They couldn't actually see anything really wrong. He was able to get back to the pits when the car was brought back and come out later on. But McLaren as well, also struggling with unreliability. Very focused on their brakes, though. It seems as if the front brakes just aren't quite big enough for the cooling demands. So basically, Lando Norris, who's been in the car for all of the tests because Daniel Ricciardo sadly is unwell. Norris can't do many laps at a time simply because the brakes are going to overheat and he's going to have a real problem. He did stop at the end of the pit lane. Now, at the time of recording this, we haven't added an explanation as to why that was. But I was actually down at turn 1. I was lucky enough to go trackside, only very, very briefly. I tend to go late in the day because otherwise I'll get horrendously sunburnt. But yeah, I was right by him. He started pushing the car all by himself all the way back to the pits. I thought, fair enough for having that initiative. He was joined by some marshals, helped him out later on, but certainly got things back a little bit quicker for McLaren. But what's worrying there for McLaren is that they look so strong in Barcelona. That they're not having the big problem with porpoising, which is still affecting all the cars. Lewis Hamilton saying it's still really bad on the Mercedes today. So yeah, it's not what McLaren would have wanted, and hopefully them not massively hindering their performance.
So yeah, definitely a real mixed bag for the F1 grid today. But going into the final day of pre-season testing tomorrow, which team would you say is in need of a big final day?
That's a good question. I'm probably going to go with Haas. Obviously in the news a lot because of all the unfortunate stuff that's happened there, but actually speaking to members of the team, the suggestion is they feel that they've actually got quite a competitive car, just haven't been able to show it. Now, I'm not necessarily going to go from the back of the grid to the front of the grid and be a world beater, but just generally they seem to think, we've got some bits on there that we're very happy with. Drivers are suggesting actually, feels okay. Kevin Magnussen, think everything's okay because he's back in Formula One. He's very, very happy. But obviously, the team genuinely feeling better. The problem is they just haven't had so many unreliability worries. Again, that's sort of the big news story of the day, as I say, in Barcelona. Little niggles have carried on here as well in Bahrain. So they lost that morning's running. They're going to get it back. He had an extra hour, Magnussen, on track tonight, and they've got to do a whole 11 hours solidly because they get an extra 2 hours after the session will end for everybody else tomorrow. And during the lunch break, Haas they won't be circling constantly like a Le Mans stint or anything like that. But yeah, certainly a big day coming up for Haas. So, fingers crossed it all works out for them.
Definitely. Well, a very important final day coming up for the entire F1 paddock. Alex, thank you very much for joining me. And yes, we'll have all of the reaction and news, obviously, from the last day of pre-season testing in Barcelona. And for now, farewell from Bahrain.